Hello there, you're listening to the Go podcast. I'm St-Pierre, and today we will talk about error handling in Go for the first episode. Today we will talk about the infamous error handling in Go, this famous piece where most newcomers to the language will have kind of the same reaction, which is touching probably the don't repeat yourself nerve, and for good reason, because at first it seems to be that there is this if error not equal nil block everywhere in the code, but there is a good reason for that, and this is what we will talk about today. One thing that changed me as a developer when I started using Go in 2014 is the concept of this happy path. And it changed me not only in Go, but in most of the other languages that I'm still using today. So it made me want to keep this happy path. So what we talk about when we talk about the happy path, so it basically means that when you create a function, the first indentation of your function is mostly the good thing. So it's the happy path of the function. If something is to be wrong, then you will probably be inside of this if error not equal nil block. So quickly you can scan code and you can see where things can go wrong in when you are looking at the code. So it really helped for readability, and also when I was doing mostly .NET at the beginning of my career, most of the time I was doing an if, and the happy path was in that if. So let's say you want to do something based on if the current user has permission or not.
Eagle 1, first strike, you have permission to engage the target.
So instead of checking if they don't have the permission and do something there and continue in the happy path, most of the time I was doing my code inside my if. So I was doing like if the current user has access to this, and now I was continuing in that block. So I was indenting, and now it could go very far, in fact, in terms of indentation instead. And at the end of all of those things, then you now need to capture the what happened. So there is a lot of else that goes with that. So Go made me realize, due to the way error are handled, that it's a better programming model, in my opinion, to tackle the error on the indentation side of things and let the happy path of the function having only what can go great about your function. Another aspect of those if error not equal nil block that newcomers might not understand at first is it's a great place to clean up and do some return to a normal state kind of things. So let's say you have multiple functions that call themselves in a stack trace way. Maybe you are creating some temporary files or any kind of resources or anything that would need to be cleaned up if something goes wrong. So sometimes it's a great place to do some cleanup in there, because, and I'm not talking here about any kind of differ. So let's say you want to open a file and write into a file, so you can use differ and whatnot. So if there is an error at some point, well, the file handle will be closed. So that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm really talking about your functions is supposed to do something, and you know that it's going to change the state of the application or do anything that needs to be rolled back. So this is a great place to do that in those blocks. So what does we want to say about Go treat error as values? So it's basically the same as an int or float. So the error type is in fact just an interface with only one function in it, the error function that returns a string. So anything that satisfies this interface will be considered like a valid error. And this is also very nice. We will talk about that in a couple of minutes. But
I do not understand.
Let's take some time here to really understand what is going on. So if usually you do have your error at the end of the multiple return type function. Usually, I mean 90% of the time of what I've seen so far, you often see like 2 return values for typical Go function. Sometimes 3, but it's rarer. And the last return parameter is your error. So you will have lots of repetition for sure. That you will have those 2 values, the semicolon and the equal sign, and now the call to your function, and after that you will check for error. If you take some times and really embrace this format, you will see that it's not that terrible at the end. And of course, Go is a verbose language, so compared to, let's say, Rust and his question mark, for example, or let's take Erlang or an Elixir, which they propose to let the process crash instead of really taking some code to handle error for some things. Of course, you have any kind of you can match for anything that happens. But the point is, I think in a bigger team, it enforces all people to use the same format. And this is what Go is all about, in my opinion, at least. It's really the simplicity of the code, making sure that you will return to a project that you have not opened in 2-3 years. You will open your editor and you will be at home. You will understand what's going on, and you should be fine. Does it produce more verbose code bases? Probably. Is it easier to read? Is it easier to reason about for lots of developers in the team? I think so. I think it's just simpler, the code base that is generated, and the error handling is one aspect compared to, let's say, Java and C# exceptions handling. It's kind of hard to make sure that all the team members will obey to certain rules and whatnot. And it's also true, for dynamic language, Python and Ruby as well. So there's not much try catch or anything like that. So I understand that it's a friction point that it is there since a long time. But I think if someone could just pass this specific moment of repulsion, or call it what you want, it does make things simpler at the end. So the way you communicate any context to your caller. So let's say we have 2 functions, and function A called function B, and there is an error occurring in function B. Then usually function B will just return an error. But let's imagine that we have 3 functions. So there is function A, B, C, and so A called B, B called C. So in that case, you wrap the previous error and you give some more context into it. So this is useful to understand exactly where the error is occurring, but it can also be tricky at some point, because I've seen it overused, and sometimes, let's say in a call stack of 10 function, receiving all the previous contexts might not be helpful at the end. So my rule of thumb is to really ask myself before wrapping and kind of blindly returning to the caller, let's make sure that it makes sense for them to receive any kind of context for anything that was one level below what they were calling. So for instance, in our example ABC, well, the function A might not care about the context of what happened in function C, in fact. So sometimes instead of wrapping in function B, it might be more useful to just return a new error at this moment, and function B would know what to do with the context it received from function C. If you are an old school Go user like me, you might not be familiar with using the new Go 1.13 changes that were made in the errors package. But if you don't, I would encourage you to check it out. I'm talking here mostly about the errors.is and the errors.has. So those two functions are really interesting when we are talking about capturing what went wrong with a specific function. So for instance, let's say you are creating a package or a library. It would be extremely helpful for the consumer of your package to have some kind of errors being defined in your package. So let's imagine we have a simple string manipulation package. Whatever it does, it's not important. But let's say we have a function that accepts string and would do some manipulation on the string and return a string. So if the consumer would pass us an empty string, it might be helpful for them to receive an error that you would define on your package. So you could have capital ERR, so ERR empty string. So that's the type that you would declare in your package. And this would be equal to errors.new, and you would pass a string there, let's say something like you cannot pass empty string or whatever that makes sense. So by doing that, and with the Go 1.13 changes to the errors package, the caller of this function could use the errors.is and compare that with your exported ERR empty string. So that way, your caller, the consumer of your package, even if it's you, I mean, any other package or any other developers, for that matter, could do something about that. So they could warn the user, for example, in the UI if it's if it's the proper things to do. But the point is, this is a great way to have some kind of control and some kind of it just makes things clean. So make sure that you're creating your error. Also, sometimes you might want to have more context to an error. So you would define a struct with custom fields that make sense for you. So if you know that the caller will need some fields and you don't really want to stuff them in the string directly, but instead having a nicer and strongly typed structure for this, then you just have to create a structure and export it, and it just need to implement the error interface. So you just need to create an error function on your type that returns string, and now you're good to go. So your caller or your consumer of your package, this function, they could use the errors package as function to get exactly this type. So that way they could they could access the fields that you declare on your struct directly in their code. So this is extremely useful. And also the wrap and unwrap function in the errors package that were added in Go 1.13 are extremely useful to extract wrapped error type that were wrapped above you. So if we took the example of function ABC, then we could wrap the function and unwrap it on the error, and unwrap it on the function A, for example. So yeah, I think it all cleans up and it makes things simpler to understand, and in the long term extremely flexible for changes and additional let's say you are refactoring something, then it will not break your refactoring and whatnot. It should not. So yeah. All right, that's it for this week. I hope you liked the episode. And again, if you can share and talk about the podcast, that would be extremely appreciated. Also, if you want to check my book out, I have a course named Build SaaS App in Go. So it's at buildsasappingo.com. All right, see you in 2 weeks. Bye.